is one of my favourite topics, is on sustainability. So I'm really pleased to have a really interesting and varied panel here for you today. I'm representing Women in Geospatial. We're a network online. Find us, join in. We're always looking for allies, so do come and find us. I'm also a journalist, work for MapLine, which is the British Cartographic Society, and working on how to join the geospatial sector to ESG reporting. So that's my favourite bit. We have three amazing panellists here today with us. We have Biswajit Acharya, consulting partner and from sustainable banking, finance and investment at Tata Consultancy Services, here on my right. We have Jasmine Small, from data science and research officer at Marine Stewardship Council, MSc. And we have Andrew Smith on the end, co-founder of Fathom. So give him a nice warm round of applause. So I don't know if I'm supposed to hand this over to you for you to speak, or your mics are working, but we'll try with your mics first. Yeah. Okay. So would you like to introduce yourself first? Well, a little bit more.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm very glad to be here and this event. I'm part of Tata Consultancy Group, which is a big company of the Tata Group. So we are pretty much in every business. But my unit is mainly in the banking and financial industries. And part of the sustainable banking and finance is my unit's work.
Excellent.
Thank you for introducing us, Caroline. So I'm Jasmine. I work for the Marine Stewardship Council. Essentially, we are an international non-profit that works to end overfishing around the world. So you might recognize the MSC blue logo, which if you purchase that product, it means that it has been certified in our program and standards. And I work with the research team and helping a lot with the spatial database analysis.
Hi everyone, my name's Andy, one of the founders at Fathom. So by background, I'm a research scientist really, so I did a Ph.D. building computational flood models, and that is indeed what Fathom does. So we build computer models that simulate flooding, and we build those models of actually the whole planet. So we try and simulate the risk of flood inundation everywhere on the planet. These days, my job title is COO, and I'm still trying to figure out what that actually means, but I spend most of my time running the company these days, so yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So we'll start with Andrew. We're going to go on to some nerdy stuff first. How does Fathom ensure consistency when it comes to exposure and risk analysis year on year?
Year on year, I mean, in truth, we don't ensure consistency. And the reason for that is that building these kinds of computer models is really new. Even as a scientific field, it's really, really new. We've only been building these models, even in academia, for a few years. So the message there is that they are very new and they're very juvenile. So they do change in time, and they change because of input data sets changing, so we get better input data sets. The methodologies we employ also change, so the models can change year on year. Also, we're simulating really extreme events, and extreme events are, by their nature, very rare. So every single year, we get more observations of the climate system, and that can actually change some of the boundary conditions that go into our models. So they do actually change, and that can be a problem, right? If you're trying to use information to write risk, if you're an insurance company and you're looking to price insurance or manage your exposure, if you're getting slightly different results from a model every year, that can be a little difficult. But one of the things that does remain consistent in the things that we do is we're very transparent with the methods. So we spend a lot of our time engaging with academia, writing research papers. So at least when results do change, we have a good explanation as to why.
That's cool. That's cool. So as flood risk is becoming, unfortunately, increasing an issue for businesses and regional governments around the world, please give us a use case where someone has used your model.
Use cases. So, I mean, when we started the company, the idea was to provide information to insurance companies. So insurance companies, you guys are probably, well, some of you will be aware of this, there's a whole field called catastrophe modeling, and they enable insurance companies to price risk, and that was the target audience really for the things that we were building. But in fact, in the last 5, especially 2 or 3 years, the market for risk information, climate risk information, is much bigger than just insurance companies. So we license data to insurance companies, banks, engineering companies, governments. We've just built the first flood maps for the state of Texas. A single use case, Microsoft use our data and they use it to map risk across their data centers. So they make sure that their data centers are not in flood zones, and also use it to ensure that when they're building new data centers, they're not in potential ponds, because that is not good for data centers.
That can be true, statement said. So then how do you, this is using previous data, I'm assuming, to create the models. Are you also looking at the prediction of risk?
Yeah, we do. So prediction, I mean, when I think of prediction, I think maybe 2 things. So you can think of forecasting and changing risk profiles. So a forecast, you're aiming to provide an answer as to when something's going to happen. So on Tuesday next week, there's going to be a big flood event. But there's also forward-looking risk modeling, so looking at things like a changing climate. We do both those things. So we use our models to undertake forecasting for the Foreign Office, to do cyclone response in Africa. But we also provide all of our data under different climate scenarios. But to do that, you have to translate uncertainties. And particularly with climate change, frankly, with these extreme events in particular, there's a lot of uncertainty in the modeling itself. So we try to represent that in the same way you would with a forecast. So we use ensembles of models. So we use ensembles of climate models, and even ensembles of things like river models, and try and compound all those uncertainties. The result is that often the uncertainty range can be really big, and sometimes that's kind of difficult to make a decision on, but that's not my job. So yeah, all
Just
I do is
supply
translate.
the data, dude. I'll let everybody else worry about that. That's cool. So talking about data, we're going to move to Jasmine next. So how does the Marine Stewardship Council program and standards contribute to reaching targets for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for everyone else?
So essentially, MSC certification has been recognized in the UN's new Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15 as a global indicator for action on biodiversity loss. So essentially, it's a way to scientifically measure efforts to reverse alarming declines in the world's biodiversity. So the first target relates to the sustainable management and trade in wild species. And the second target relates to the integration of biodiversity values in economies. So in our research, we found that the MSc program and its standard can contribute to the achievement of 5 SDGs, which are life below water, so SDG 14, 8, which is economic growth, 2, zero hunger, and 12, which is related to sustainable consumption and production. So as the impacts of climate change take place, fishing sustainably in a way that maintains and restores resilience of ecosystems are more important than ever. And to sum it up, fisheries need to adapt to changes in the distribution of seafood stocks and population levels, which requires better monitoring and management and greater international cooperation.
That's awesome. Definitely a region for standards, and that coming from your council, and then that being approved at the UN, that's a massive bonus. So I want to understand a little bit more about how does the Marine Stewardship Council actually influence the end user or the GIS user?
So an example I will bring up is a case study around tunas. So looking at the figure on the bottom right, essentially a bit of background. So tuna is actually one of the world's most popular seafoods due to market demands. And in 2021 to 22, the global tuna catch from MSC certified sustainable fisheries reached nearly 2 million tons compared to less than 1 million tons only 4 years earlier. So the figure up on the board shows that there was a quick growth of MSC certified tuna fishing areas between 2019 and 2022. This demonstrates the importance that GIS can identify MSC certified fishing areas that overlap. because of one possibility could be associated with risk to the program. So essentially, if there's many overlapping fisheries in some location and there's a problem with tuna stock in that location, then there's a risk that all of the overlapping fisheries could simultaneously fail to meet the fishery standards all at once. However, in the figure above, the greatest expansion shows that it has occurred in the Eastern Pacific Ocean and Western Central Pacific Ocean. So one reason for the expansion of MSC certified tuna may be to do with stock status or with fisheries management structures. And in the earlier years, they were not yet at MSC threshold, but once stock status has improved or management measures were put in place, then it has allowed several fisheries to become certified all at once. And just to sum it up, really, I find it really important that we are starting to use GIS analysis for the Marine Stewardship Council, because we're able to look at the drivers and gaps in the market that are located in the world, and to basically safeguard our oceans.
So yeah, the question is really that everyone's mind in the audience really is, was the salmon that we had at lunch MSC certified? You know? Do we know? So that might be a question for later. Anyway. Yeah, have you got a little bit more on the biodiversity of fish stocks?
So essentially, with the figure above, we're just able to identify really like what areas are in the program. We also work with external researchers in the community, and we often try and collaborate with the data that's out there from researchers and cooperate with the UN.
So, and this data is available?
Some of it is publicly available online. There's some scientific papers out there relating to stocks, and we're also in the works of publishing other papers around MSC assessment scoring in the program.
Awesome, thank you, that's great. Just on your map, maybe you need to focus more on the Pacific, but you know.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah. Since there's a massive concentration. Biswat, we go to you, and I'm interested to know, because I'm interested in this field, what is spatial finance, and how is it related to spatial data science?
Okay, so spatial finance is a new term coined about 2013. It was an Oxford University Sustainable Finance Group. So what it means is that financial theories and practices are very much dependent on geographical locations and environment around that. So that's the premise of spatial finance. So finance, we have to understand that finance is a lifeblood for our life. It is sustaining the current life as well as the growth in the future for the whole population and for the earth. Now, how financial industry can gear towards that direction, and that's pretty much what is a spatial finance is about. Yeah? And spatial data, as the name itself says, is a spatial finance. So what it means is that how, so far we were using market data, or there are other synthetic data, or human-generated transactional data. But now we are using more and more spatial data, and all the experts discussed about that. Spatial data is a satellite data, different devices data, or even drone data, and other meteorological data, et cetera, et cetera. So all these data we are using to have more informed decisions about the finances.
And so that is for investment, or what is it leading to?
Right. Okay. So finance is about mainly broadly. Well, I'm taking a broad approach here. So it's about, we do valuation. So everything has a value, and then for everything there's a risk. So the valuation, these two things we have to measure every day in finance world. So when you are talking about this, so Andy talked about the risk, right? That's one of the risks. That's a physical risk. But then there are other risks. for example, if there's a flood-prone area or the drought-prone area, or due to climate change, it is becoming a heat-stress area, so, or a wildfire. So it's not only affecting the asset itself, which is maybe a house, a factory, a warehouse, or a power generation plant, or any plant. It's about the demography around that place, how that is being impacted, and what will be the impact on the industry in that particular area, right? So all put together, that's spatial finance and investment divisions.
So your company, Tata Consultancy Services, what they're doing in the field and themselves relating to spatial data science, indeed, specifically.
Yes, yeah. So as far as my unit is concerned, so we are trying to develop risk models. What Andy mentioned is not only the flood, but other risk models, right? As I mentioned, the wildfire, drought, heat stress, any other physical risk model, and how those can be quantified to take informed decisions in financial investments and growth as such. So that's what we do. So we have developed that. And then the other part of it, I think pretty much all the experts discussed about the data and the complexity about the data. Now, that's where there's a gap. Unless we can measure something, we cannot improve that, right? And as far as the climate change is concerned, we are far behind that measuring the impact, right? We talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. How do you define, how do you calculate the scope 3 emissions? Very difficult. The whole industry is struggling to do that. So we have built some sort of a platform where we can collect the data from different sources and then whittle out the right data and then project it make it usable. So that's what we do.
Okay.
So that's what we do.
So this is really interesting. Is scope 1 is the fuels themselves, yes. And then scope 2 is the buildings or the use of the energy, and then scope 3 is the supply chain that comes to be used for something. So when we're talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, that's what we're identifying here, and this is what you're looking to measure.
We don't measure, so we don't measure it because you cannot measure an emission from your supplier, vendor, and supply maybe a tertiary level supplier somewhere in the world, right? You cannot do that. So what we can do is that if there is local agencies or local data suppliers, so we get the data, but we have to verify that's as per our requirement. And then there are government regulations and directives which all the industries have to follow. So we make sure that we are following the right thing so that we are making the right use of the data.
Okay, excellent. So what trends do you see in spatial data science, particularly related to the new legislation in environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG reporting and governance?
Well, this has become in the last 4 or 5 years a very good. Very positive changes happening, but still we have a lot to achieve in terms of governance. There are many countries, many opinions, and requirements. So the trend which is coming is, of course, we are adopting more and more standardized ways of measuring and controlling the emissions, and of course the climate change projection. Finance industry was not very keen initially, but now they are in the forefront. And they are investing and taking the risk for all other industries, manufacturing, retail, everything. They are saying that this is what you have to do, and which is a very positive change. And I'm very hopeful that in the next 4 or 5 years, it will be towards achieving our big goals like SDGs and all that. I hope very soon we'll reach those targets.
So we're coming up to a few seconds left. So we can take some questions from the audience. Anyone have any questions for our panelists? Otherwise, I have a few ready. No, I can't see anyone.
There's one over there.
Oh, is there? Okay.
To what extent are you seeing spatial data and sustainability being factored into asset valuations? Or is it still mostly reporting and risk-based?
So, question two.
Do you want to?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it is now being factored even into kind of individual house valuations. You're getting some spatial data being opened up to the public even, and you can go on and kind of look at what exposure a specific building is exposed to. So it is happening. I think there'll be probably some more regulation in time to ensure that the data that are put out there, that are used to value assets, are robust, reliable, transparent. I think it's really important that we do that because lots of the data sets that we use right now to understand things like climate risk are, again, very juvenile. So whether they're appropriate for things like individual asset valuations is, I think, still up for debate. The Wild West is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but it is it's a new space for sure. These data sets opening up for things like asset valuation, but again, I think regulation will probably in time tighten that up a little bit.
There's a huge amount of classification systems out there, and it'd be good to see that unified so that we have something more, dare I say, concrete to use and then adhere to, so that would be super helpful. Do we have one more last question? Aya here in the middle.
We have one question up here.
Okay.
Yeah. I previously worked in property where our main markets were in like the Philippines and Indonesia. Do you find with your data sets there's quite a large difference between the quantity and quality of data available for this? The main thing I was thinking, like, especially places that are probably going to be most affected by a lot of these issues are also the places that are likely to have less high-quality surveying data or all of the stuff that's pretty normal in the Western world.
Does anyone want to answer that one?
I'm happy to, but I'm hogging, I know.
Yeah, I can answer a little bit, but
go on.
do you wanna...
No, that's fine.
Indonesia has just had the cadastre information mapped, which definitely makes it easier to then work out which parcel of land you're referring to. But otherwise it's incredibly difficult because these things are not necessarily always resourced. But this is where Landsat and ESA's satellite imagery also helps, but there is gaps, definitely. Anyone else?
No, I think pretty much I agree with you. So on the qualitative quantities data, in terms of quantitative data, there are lots of sources we can get the data from. But quality, that's a subjective evaluation. How do you define the quality of it? So that's where we are struggling, and that's where the standards and the models come into picture. What is, for example, you might have heard about there's a standard called GRI, right? Reporting Initiative, and that they stipulate this is what is acceptable, this is what is not acceptable. So yeah, there are a lot of, in short, we have a long way to go.
Definitely. I'm just going to say thank you very much to all our panelists. So if you give them a nice big round of applause. Thank you.